What's up? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are putting on wheel hub assemblies that I picked up off Amazon for about a third of the price that I would have spent on Motorcraft. These wheel hubs were like 170 bucks compared to the $300 that they are for Motorcraft a piece. Like these were 170 together, and then Motorcraft is 300 per wheel hub assembly. So check out the video. So I went ahead and pulled this one out of the box. This is it without the bag on. We have our speed sensor. I believe this is a speed sensor. Got that wire. Everything looks nice and new. It's not refurbished or anything. It's pretty solid. That's what this Autoround brand looks like. There should be a link down in the description where you can find these exact ones that I ordered. And the driver side and the passenger side are identical. This wheel hub assembly on the left, the one that came off the truck, if this is an OEM Motorcraft, this is a $300 part. You can check online. Motorcraft it's almost $300. It's like $280 or something just for one. This, I paid $170 for both of them. Divide 170 by 2, that's $85 a piece. And I feel like this one looks a little bit beefier than this one. If you look here, we're very thin on the center of the hub right here. This is thinner. This is thicker. It's thicker here. So I don't know. Honestly, I'd probably buy this over the Motorcraft just because it's beefier. So you can find these on Amazon, and might come from China, but it looks to be, I don't know, built a little bit thicker, beefier. If you want to save some money, Autoround on Amazon. When you go to order these, you can order one, or you can order one for each side. They're the same part, so don't worry about that. But now that we got it out of the bag, we can go ahead and get started jacking the truck up. Next thing we're gonna do, remove our brake caliper, and we're gonna hang it over here. We wanna hang this so we don't mess up our brake lines, end up with any leaks. You don't wanna stretch your brake lines or anything like that. We'll have to remove this bracket from our steering knuckle so that our line can come over here and hang down with the caliper, because we're gonna have to remove this here. And then we're gonna remove the dust cap, remove the nut that's under there. Once we remove this and that, we can pull our rotor off. To remove the brake caliper, we got this bolt here and this bolt down here, and they are two 21 millimeter bolts. So you'll need a 21 millimeter socket for that bolt and the one under it. And this thing should just be able to pull off backwards. So before we remove our 21 millimeter bolts back here that I was just talking about, we have to remove our two 13 millimeter bolts, which are here and here, and that's going to allow the caliper to come off. And then after the caliper comes off, then you do the 21 millimeter bolts, which will remove the bracket that holds the caliper in place. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove these. That should be it for the brakes, besides this bolt right here that holds the brake line. So we're gonna do that and get it out of the way. So now we have our bracket that holds the brake pads and the brake caliper removed. I always put my bolts back in the holes just so I don't misplace them anywhere. Now that that's all removed, we should be able to go ahead and remove our rotor. And once I get this off, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the ball joint from the steering knuckle. So Okay, so we got our rotor off. All that took was some, we had to put some penetrant on there, tap it with our dead blow, and it broke off of there and we were able to pull it off. You have to remove the dust cover, which is just held on by 3 8mm bolts. Now that that dust cover is removed, there is 4 18mm bolts that hold our hub assembly in here. You got 1, 2, and then 2 on the other side. I'm gonna go ahead and remove these 4 bolts, and then we should be able to pull the hub assembly out of its little home where it lives right here. Okay, so after removing our hub assembly, you can see on the spindle here, there's heat marks from these bearings down in here. So I think the bearings around the spindle were getting hot. I guess there just wasn't enough grease down in there. I'm not sure. Okay, so I have figured out the noise and what it is and what's causing it. So when you turn the truck on, there's a hose back here. On the back side of this right here, this is the 4x4 actuator assembly. This hose that comes in here and plugs in here, you can pull it off and you can tell that there's vacuum on that line. And when the vacuum is applied, this gear here is supposed to suck in. Well, I can turn on the truck right now, which I just did. That assembly right there is not sucking in. So there must be a hole or something that is not allowing it to create vacuum. So I'm gonna have to run to O'Reilly's right now and pick up this assembly right here. And that also means that ball joint's gonna have to come off. This knuckle soft gonna come down like this, and then you gotta pull the spindle out, and then you can remove this piece here, this whole assembly right here. I'm gonna run to O'Reilly's, get that, and we'll get back to work.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
All right, so we just got back from O'Reilly's. They had one 4x4 actuator, which is okay because I'm only gonna have time to do the driver's side today. Tomorrow I can go pick up the other one. I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect the ball joint here. That'll allow the knuckle to swing out like this, and then we will be able to pull the spindle out of the back side of the actuator and then remove the actuator itself, which is held in there by these 8mm bolts here, here, and on the other side. All right, so to get the ball joint off, we use a torch to heat up this outside edge with the torch, and then smack it with a hammer a bunch of times. I didn't even use a sledgehammer. I just used this normal claw hammer and tapped it a bunch of good times out here while heating it up with the torch, and it just popped down. Leave this nut almost all the way off, but not quite, so that when it does pop out, it'll catch it and this thing won't just fall all the way down. But that nut for the control arm is a 18mm nut. So that is off. So now I'm gonna unscrew this nut. The knuckle will fall out, and we should be able to get to our 4x4 actuator. Okay, so we got our old actuator out of there, and it is actually over here on the table. This is the old actuator. I'm gonna put some gloves on because that thing is filthy. And as you can see, I don't think it's supposed to be separated like this. This is why it cannot get vacuum. This is supposed to be one whole part. And when the truck puts vacuum to the hub, this is supposed to suck in like that. Well, it wasn't sucking in. So what I was hearing was a grinding noise from this part to this part because it wasn't sucking in and it wasn't fully engaging. So it was just sitting there grinding. Here is the new one in the bag. So it comes all nice and greasy. It's supposed to be one whole piece like this. and this is 2 pieces. So there ain't no fixing this one. Now we have our new one, and I can go ahead and put it on the back side of our knuckle and start reinstalling everything. Okay, so I just got the spindle all cleaned off. We cleaned the old grease off and got all that dirt out of it and dust, whatever. It was like black grease because it had so much dust in it. So we cleaned it all off, and then we reapplied some red grease. The actuator had yellow grease in it, but should be all right. We got the actuator back in there. Now I gotta take my 8mm bolts, bolt it back in. Once these are bolted in, we can lift the knuckle back up and align these gears with the gears inside the actuator. I put a little bit of grease on this rubber seal right here that kind of seals the vacuum from escaping. It's always nice to have a lubed seal against metal, because this rubber piece sits up against the metal on the inside of the knuckle. That's all ready to go. This is aligned in the knuckle, and tighten these down, and then we'll lift up our knuckle and start putting her back together. All right, so putting this back together is a little tricky because your CV shaft back here wants to come out of its home right there. When you go to put the hub in, it wants to push the axle back out of the gears. So when I was installing it, I was twisting this until I could feel it lock in with those gears. And when I got the spindle through enough, I put that nut on there so that it couldn't push it back out. Now I got this most of the way tightened down. It wasn't fully tight yet, but I wanted to make sure that the 4x4 actuator was actually working before I tightened it all the way down. And the way that I know that it's working is when I go to spin this, the CV shaft back there is not spinning. The hub can spin, but the axle is not. So, and once I take the vacuum off, if I just pull this line right here, now when I spin it, the axle spins too. So that's the way I'd make sure that that works. So we'll go ahead and put that back on, and now it spins free again. So shut the truck off and finish tightening everything up. That's basically everything you got to do to replace your 4x4 actuators and your hub assembly. I wasn't planning on doing 4x4 actuators, but I found out that's what the problem was. So we got a new one in there. Everything is back together as it should be. The last thing I have to do is hook up our speed sensor right there, or ABS. I can't ever remember what this wire is. I think it's speed sensor, but anyways, it doesn't matter. It's got to be hooked up. So I can find where that hooks up at. and plug it in and throw the tire back on there. So that's gonna be it for today's video. I have had these wheel hubs on here for about 2 months now, about 10,000 miles, and I haven't had any issues with them at all. So you wanna save you some money, click on the link below, get you some wheel hubs off Amazon, and that's gonna be it for today's video. Peace.